so that you have a diamond shape. And we had 12 of them around the periphery of the craft. And we had magnets, horseshoe magnets, 12 of those around the craft. So when you started rotating and counter-rotating, as these neutrons went through the field, they would act as a generator and a capacitor in themselves, and they would generate a lot of power, not necessarily electrical power, but vibrational power. When you get to the resonant frequency of your surroundings, it cancels everything out. It goes to a 0 point. And once you've reached 0 point, then you can go anywhere you want. And you have your own force field around the craft.
Do you control its up and down and left and right movements by how fast it spins or other gyros in there?
Yeah, the ones with the models we had remotes, to operate the models. But when you get up into the larger craft, it's not necessary, because everything then, as Carr was explaining, the difference between the brain and the mind is synergetic. You operate the craft like it was a friend. It's like it was a living thing, because
connect with the craft.
Yes, and that's the only way that our particular craft would work.
There's a mental interface?
Yes.
So it's kind of like the thoughts carry out a vibration as well, and you have to go in harmony with the ship.
So some sort of morphogenic field was created, perhaps, some sort of almost living field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ralph, have you had a chance to fly it yourself?
Flying is an antiquated word when it comes to the type of spaceships that we were operating, because they don't conventionally fly.
Or levitate.
They levitate and they teleport. They move through this thing called time and space. They actually traverse through multi-dimensions.
So you created an artificial gravity field, is it safe to say?
Yeah, you could say that, yeah.
Is this in any way related to the work of John Hutchinson and his anti-gravity experiments?
Well, it's along the same lines. I know John, he's an associate of our group. And as I mentioned before, there's all forms of levitation. But where ours differs from John's is that in order to operate our craft, it takes spirit, it takes a synergy. You have to recognize the craft as an entity of life itself. It has a consciousness, if you will, of its own. What John is doing is wonderful. I'm glad he's discovered a tremendous field of levitation and the composition of metal and molecular structures.
Ralph, can you tell us about your experience as being the co-pilot of one of these discs?
Sure. The next stage up was the 45-foot craft. They had already designed and built it, and they wanted us to test it. So we got on board, and near the center of the craft was a giant crystal ball in a kind of a gyroscopic holder. Underneath that was a laser that came up through the bottom of this crystal. And as the light came up and dispersed around this crystal, it lit up the crystal from infrared all the way around to ultraviolet. And then Carr said, okay, guys, what I want you to do is just clear your brain and use your mind. So this is an experiment. And we're going to go outside and back in through what's known as time and space. And all you have to do is concentrate on what I'm about to tell you. We're going to go downrange 10 miles. And that 10 miles downrange is equated to the vibratory rate of the color aquamarine. The colors just kind of dissolved and started turning into this brilliant aquamarine. And it lit up the whole ship. And then he said, okay, that's it, boys. Get out of the craft, and we're going to debriefing. And we looked at each other like, oh, I don't think it worked. We didn't go anywhere. We didn't do anything. And we said, well, it didn't work, did it? They said, why don't you guys empty your pockets? And we started pulling out sticks and stones and grass and stuff and putting them on the table. And I know we didn't have those going in. And where in the heck did this come from? And he said, well, You remember I told you about the brain has a limited capacity. It cannot believe beyond its jurisdiction. It doesn't want to believe anything beyond that. So you travel with your mind, and it will come back to you, and then all these dots will be filled in as your life progresses. You'll remember what you did. It was in retrospect, I did go back now, and I do remember going and getting out of the craft. There was 3 of us. We walked down this ramp. We got out and we went over to a little hillside. I can see it right now. We picked up rocks and sticks, put them in our pockets, and we got back on board. I remember it now, but I didn't remember it then.
It sounds like this technology is something that we have to be spiritually advanced enough to be able to use it.
And Carr explained that as higher consciousness. He said, you've got to raise the consciousness.
When you were operating this disc, did you notice or were you told that anything changed as far as the structure of the craft?
There's a consistent expansion and contraction. It's almost so instantaneous that it's unnoticeable. And in one of the smaller demonstrations, we had a small model, aluminum model, and I could hear this hum, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful feeling while this thing was running, and I was touching it, and then it got more and more intense, and then I found like it was Jell-O, and I could put my fingers on it like Jell-O, and I looked at the other guys, and then I put my fingers inside this aluminum with my hand. I said, this is impossible, but I'm doing this, and I put it in and out of the craft. And Carr was over there because he said, you're energy, and that's energy. And when you understand that and you get a harmonic with energy, you get a balance, you can do anything. There's no limit. So the next day, he had another model, and we put it up, but he was going to accelerate beyond. He says, these retinas are like cameras, are flashing at milliseconds. And when you flash fast enough, things seemingly disappear. So with that in mind, here's our next demonstration. So we fired this one up, and we were all watching it, and I was getting ready to put my hand in it, and whew, the whole thing disappeared right in front of us. He said it's quite simple. Tesla did this all the time in his laboratory, and it's teleported. He said, well, where did it go? And he said, well, it might have landed on somebody's dining room table. I don't know. He says, I don't know yet where it went, and I don't know if it'll come back. Maybe it'll show up someday. Maybe it's gone. Maybe it's still there.
But we just don't see it.
So we don't see it, yeah. And it's out of our dimension. And he explained that the mind, when you tune yourself high enough and you get into the mind space instead of the brain space, instead of logic or instead of reasoning or instead of all those things, you just get up to a sense of knowing. You know who and what you are. That you're a creative, immortal, infinite being. And we all are. And he said, everybody on this planet are gods by comparison, and they don't know it. They're asleep. And until they wake up, this is what our job is. We're making these toys, trying to get them to wake up, to realize there's no limits to what they can do. They don't have to live in servitude. They don't have to live in poverty. They've just been told that by people that unfortunately want to control things. Carr explained to us that the brain that we have operates this water vessel which we live in. But the energy that inhabits the vessel is who and what we are. We are energy, we're not bodies. The energy is all magnetic in nature, it's free in nature. We're swimming in energy. Well, before we could get any further with it, we were invaded, if you will, by people with a piece of paper that said they were, at this time, closing us down. The paper read that we were attempting to overthrow the monetary system of the United States, and that could be construed as high treason, and we were shutting you down and confiscating all your equipment.
Wait a minute. Didn't John Hutchison say the same thing about the Canadian government? That they confiscated his entire lab at one time?
I stayed in touch with Carr as much as I could, but as soon as I contacted him, I was contacted by somebody. We told you to stay away from even thinking about this.
Well, what did the energy companies do to Carr?
The powers that be, namely the power companies, weren't quite interested in anything to do with Tesla or Carr. They didn't want this information out. It was even beyond the energy company. It came down to, and it can be traced to this day, back to the international banking system out of England. That's where this all started the monetary system per se.
Because his inventions were so revolutionary, would it upset the whole banking system?
Yes, it would upset everything. They had a very, very earnest effort put forth to eliminate Carr and his inventions and his ideas.
Ralph, do you think you're going to build models again?
We're doing it now. We have pods related to research facilities all over the United States because I'm getting a lot of help, a lot of support. And there's people like me, people more brilliant than me that are involved in it. And we're waiting not for the crafts because they're waiting in the wings. The crafts are ready now, but we're waiting for the consciousness of the people to raise up high enough and to start accepting these gifts that we want to give to them.
Well, hopefully that's changing. And hopefully in time, we'll see people flying around in these crafts of yours.
Absolutely. We're going from the Flintstones to the Jetsons.
Yeah. Ralph, thanks so much for talking to us today.
Well, you're quite welcome.
Extraordinary.
It's been my pleasure.
So the Hutchinson effect and the work of Ralph Ring and Otis Carr, if controlled, are capable of providing free energy to the world, which according to Mr. Ring is what Nikola Tesla had always envisioned for humanity. I need to find out more about Tesla and the origins of zero-point energy. I'm therefore taking a detour to West Palm Beach, Florida, while Dominique stays behind to do some research and determine our next guest. In Florida, I'll be interviewing a man named Jeff Pahari, the curator of the turn-of-the-century Electrotherapy Museum. He should have more insight into what Tesla was and on his inspiring work.
Hey, Ralph. Welcome to my little Tesla museum.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks
Come
so much
on
for
in.
letting me in.
Yep.
What an interesting place you've got here. Wow. Look at all this stuff. This is incredible. Now, this looks like it is not very current. I mean, this stuff dates back, what, to the early 1900s?
Most of these machines are 1890s to the early
1890s.
1900s.
Right.
1920s being about the latest here.
And how would you describe all this stuff? Is this, are these all Tesla coils?
They're all Tesla coils. They're all in adaptations of Tesla's patents in some way, normally made for medical use.
All right. And of course, Tesla is the inventor of the Tesla coil, but what did he originally invent it for?
Originally, he was looking into a new way of generating high voltage. He was looking for a new way of distributing energy. It was part of his early alternating current experiments.
So he was looking for a way to create energy, to process energy, and how to distribute it.
Right.
So you have quite a bit of medical devices here. What else do you have that's along these therapeutic lines that Tesla was working on?
Well, they started off with the X-ray machines, and one of the first things they discovered was that they thought initially X-rays were curing people of a lot of problems. And then afterwards, they found that some of the tubes weren't working properly, and that they attributed maybe the electricity was what was curing some of them in some cases. And it goes back to an initial experiment of someone trying to cure a patient of blindness. And they noticed if you X-rayed someone that was blind, they would see flashes. One of the early patients had remarked that during all of the different treatments with different tubes, her migraines completely went away. And the doctor ended up attributing it to the machine because that was the only constant. All of the tubes he used were different, and so that was kind of the birth of electrotherapy from a Tesla coil point of view. And they went on to develop these surgical machines, and by the 20s, they were the most humane form of surgical tool available because you could cut and cauterize tissue, and especially with cancer, you could remove cysts without reinfecting other parts of the body. You were able to precisely cook and cut as if you had a laser.
So these were actually used to perform surgery on people.
Right.
Using high voltage instead of a scalpel?
Right, exactly. There were tools such as this that could connect to those machines, and you can regulate a spark length and literally plunge into tissue or cut around it, remove what you wanted, and leave what you wanted left alone.
Sounds like something out of Star Trek.
Yeah, it is.
But how old is that? We're talking, what, over 100 years?
This is 1920. And this had the advantage with Tesla coils. As you were cutting tissue, it would actually seal the blood vessels, so there wouldn't be excessive bleeding involved. So, and many times it meant life and death for someone that was being operated on.
So how is it that Tesla began experimenting with energy in a way in which that no one else before him did?
He found that by resonance, he could obtain voltage regardless of the turn-to-turn ratios in the coils.
And that means, in English?
That means that you could take a small amount of wire and get a lot of voltage.
There you go.
And at the same time, the voltage was relatively safe to handle. And there were other effects they found with it, such as heating of the body and different physiological effects on tissues.
So you have some examples over here of how Tesla technology was used for healing even close to 50 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, these are incredible. These are the violet rays?
Right.
Yeah, show me some of these. These are really wild.
Here's an early example. It was made by the Renew Life company of Chicago.
All right.
And it was basically a handheld Tesla coil.
All right.
You could plug different glass electrodes made for all parts of the body imaginable and then a few unimaginable.
So there's a little Tesla coil in here.
Right.
All right. And then you would take whatever piece that you wanted, whichever one would fit whatever body that you were trying to heal, and you put it in here.
Exactly.
Okay.
And these would normally light up inside, and,
Yeah.
and the sparks would be transmitted through them, and you could treat your face, or
You could adjust the power there?
you could adjust the intensity, and some of them even come with ozone generators that you could inhale the ozone.
Good Lord.
And
Was that healthy?
to a certain extent, but with these machines, you can knock yourself out if you're not careful.
Yeah. That would do the trick, wouldn't it? And were these popular back then? Or?
There were literally hundreds of thousands of these manufactured.
Good Lord.
So when people say, what are Tesla coils used for, or were they ever commercialized? It's a prime example.
Wow, extraordinary. You've got quite a number of them.
Oh, we've had, I estimate at one point, over 200 machines.
200 different models.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so these are all the different types of models that were put out.
These are a few examples.
So Jeff, you have some working models of Tesla coils. Can you show me what they look like when you fire them up?
Right. This is one of the best examples we have. It was made by a company called Fisher.
Right.
And it was actually a portable X-ray machine. You could just attach a tube to here.
Yeah, let's fire this thing up. See what she'll do.
Believe it or not, this is what an average Tesla coil would have looked like, built by Tesla. You can see a kind of...
So how many volts was that?
That's around 250,000 volts.
250,000. So you have a lot of different Tesla coils here, and they all do their own thing, don't they?
Right.
Well, show me a few more, because I'm anxious to see other Tesla coils doing different things.
Sure.
Okay. Wow, what's that?
That's an ozone generator that uses Tesla technologies.
So does this thing still work? Is this something that you've made, or?
Yeah, I've made this one here. It can still be fired up. You don't see much of a spark from it, but
We'll get some ozone, though, won't we?
in the dark,
Yeah.
if you attach some wires to it, you can actually light up a room by, this is actually the electric effluves produced by this machine in the dark. So you can actually use it as a light source.
Probably not the most efficient light bulb ever, but it would work.
Right.
Hit 50,000 volts. All right, yeah, let's turn it on. See what it'll look like there. I can really smell the ozone.
It infiltrates the room quickly. You can't see much of a spark from it, but in the complete darkness, the whole of the air turns violet.
So how did you get started investing all your time and energy into this?
Well, I was always a pack rat, and when I was still in school, I was at a flea market and found this machine and had no idea what it was. Brought it home. I plugged it in and started making noise and humming, and the TV started flashing across the room. And I thought, I better unplug the TV before I damage something.
So rather than plug this strange device, you figured I'd better unplug the TV.
Right. And when I got to the TV, I found someone had already unplugged it. So the TV was making sounds and the tube was flashing a bit. And to me, it was something like outer space. And I had to learn more.
So the TV wasn't even on.
Right, the TV wasn't even plugged in.
So you have a few others here. It looks like they do similar things. What does this one do here?
This in particular was a coil that they found in the early days of radio. Of course, Tesla's now credited with the invention of radio over Marconi, but they found that the Tesla coils could be used as a power supply for wireless telegraphy. And Tesla had